Welcome to Unmuted by GosuGamers, a show where we take a closer look at the esports world. In every episode, the crews will be diving into the biggest news, hot topics, and tough issues in the competitive gaming industry. And today, we're going to talk about, I would say, a pretty big topic. We're going to talk about esports versus traditional sports. But, don't get me wrong, we're not going to try go into a debate and say, no, sports is better than esports or vice versa. No. But I think what we are here is we're trying to really dive deep into it, like to look into the coexistence of esports and traditional sports and the flip side of it, and the fundamental nature and the recognition and perception of these two big, I would say, industry, right, that we live in. All right. So of course, I'm not here alone. I forgot to introduce you guys, but don't cut that. Let's continue with this. So sorry. I'm here with Div, Christy, and Will once again. I'm really horrible as a host, but no worries. I think hi guys, hi everybody.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello.
Let's talk about esports versus traditional sports. I mean, who wants to start? Like, what's your viewpoint on this? Like, the differences between traditional sports and esports.
I just want to say something at the beginning. I really love how this discussion starts with esports versus traditional sports. Like they can't coexist, you know? It's like League versus Dota or CSGO versus Valorant. I love it. But no, it's not about that, this podcast. I guess they can coexist, but indeed they are very different as entities. And this is probably what sparks the debate and what keeps the topic always going, you know?
Yeah. Christy, you have any thoughts about this?
I think the debate came from back when esports was more of a grassroots thing and was trying to legitimize their place within kind of the getting recognition and within the industry as a whole. Like, we're just as legitimate as sports. We should be taken seriously. This is a competition. And I think that that's kind of where a lot of it began from. And then there was a lot of practices that were borrowed from traditional sports in terms of tournament organization or team structure, things like this. And it just sort of started to build with, upon that. You don't hear anybody ever say, let's compare esports to some kind of classical music competition, which, there is a competition and a whole hierarchy and structure and things like that that goes along with that too. They're never brought up together or compared, even though they're both competitive. It's because it's the team aspect and because it's where we kind of, I think, turned to say, well, how do we build this up? What's going on over there? How do we gain sponsorship, eyes on us, legitimacy, things like that. So I think that's kind of where it started. And then it just grew from there to say, I'm camp this, I'm team this, and it started to get a little bit more competitive within each other.
Yeah. Will, what's your take on this?
For me personally, I want to say that esports is definitely a lot more relevant when it comes to, let's say, okay, let's put it into perspective. Last time back then, people would always want to be sort of the professional football players, basketball players, whatever you call it. Like people from the communities, let's say lower communities, they want to be pro ball players because that's all they ever know to be. But now there's like a new avenue where a lot of people from the younger generation, they can actually find ways where they can actually be part of a sporting community without actually being a part of it. Like a good example would be, I think, okay, not a good example, but a story that really hit me was about the former Dota 2 player Chuan. He was a pro basketball player, and due to an injury, he turned to Dota, and look at where he went. So I think it shouldn't be more about esports versus traditional sports, but it should be how these two can actually collaborate and actually make something of it. Because it's definitely something that two people will actually enjoy. And I think there's definitely more to it in the future. There's definitely more for it to come in the future.
Yeah. I think they
But
definitely coexist for sure. Yeah. Sorry, Div, go ahead. Yeah.
No, go. I'll keep my idea.
Okay. Yeah, they definitely can coexist, I think, for sure. And I don't think there needs to be any sort of like animosity between sports and esports. But at the same time, there's also a lot because like esports in a way is, of course, is not new anymore. It has been around for like 10 plus years, and so, and it has evolved to a state that it has more than just your
Eddie,
major.
you're losing track of time with COVID and stuff. It's more like 20 years now.
What year is it?
Okay, make it 20 years. Thank you for correcting me. Yeah, I'm bad with time. So yes, you're right. I mean, so it's not new anymore. And also, I think back to Christy, what you mentioned earlier about like the recognition thing, and that's true, right? Because we do have a lot of like traditional sporting events that kind of like trying to enter this space as well, or it could be maybe it could be like the esports titles are trying to enter the that space, because you have like Summer Olympics, you have like the SEA games that they're actually including esports title as part of the medal events even, and it's not so much of just an exhibition match. So all these kind of sparks more conversations and debate, like but some, of course, you may have a group of people that say, yeah, why not? Esports is as competitive it can be. It's similar to like chess or whatever. Yeah, it's not physical, but it's still very competitive by nature. And why can't it be sharing the same sort of recognition as sports?
Well,
so
we can ask Sweden that.
Yes, I was gonna come to Sweden, to be honest, because that's literally one of the main reasons why we are having this topic today as well, right? I mean, because what happened in Sweden with the TI10 whole hoo-ha. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's really important for us to try to justify that esports needs to be accepted, because I think it has already been accepted by many people, including people of the older generation, my dad, my parents, my uncle, aunties, whatever, the older generation. Because you used to, I would say 10 years ago when I started like writing in games, they would be like, what are you doing? And I need to spend like half an hour to kind of like explain to them that I'm a journalist for games, but not like gaming as in betting, but like I'm covering games, I'm making like I'm writing reviews and stuff like that. And but now 10 years later, they are completely familiar with the most of the terminologies. They understand the scale of it, like, and they also accept that there are more youngsters, they are taking this seriously as let's say as part of their career.
Yeah, I guess there are a couple of things that probably make this debate still going on after 10 or 20 years of esports. To me, for instance, the place where these two overlap or they are very similar is the competitive nature, right? Any sport game is very competitive, any traditional sport is very competitive, and this is where we come on the same, line. But if you think esports or competitive games, how they were called a bit more than 20 years ago, were created by a youth culture, by a youth generation that wanted a very different type of entertainment, because sports are also entertaining, just as esports, right? And they couldn't recognize themselves anymore in what's happening in the mainstream sports. Hence, whatever you did on your computer as a recreational activity, it became your profession, and it turned into competitive gaming, and now into a full industry that we call esports. And it's very hard probably for our grandparents or even parents, for some people, to understand the transition and the fact that although they are very different, the competitive nature is there and the drive is the same. There's also a problem with esports now looking, it sounds like I make it general, but it's not, but some areas of esports, right? Some games, some publishers, some game developers are really looking for mainstream recognition. And I think this is where the problem begins. This is the biggest problem, because when you look for mainstream recognition and you want to have a prime hour dedicated to your tournament or to your team segment or whatever being in esports, you start to, if you want, you kind of start to bend the reality a bit to create a positive narrative for you and to make your sport or esport, be pushed on the media. This is, I think, where the problem starts. And to support my words, I will go back to at the end of 2019. There was a big debate in the esports world with Rick Fox, former basketball player and co-owner of a league team, that said League of Legends or Worlds is coming for Super Bowl, and he compared the viewership numbers to support his words. He compared the viewership numbers of 2019 Worlds with the Super Bowl in that year. And of course, the numbers were very, very similar. It was a 4 million difference or something like that. But yeah, and this is where I think we bend reality to just make it to mainstream. Because if you think esports are a global phenomenon, yeah, you can play a game from China, from Europe, from United States, wherever. You can watch it from wherever the globe. So it's global, while Super Bowl in this example is just something that is really watched in US, right? So when you say Super Bowl is very close to world's numbers, you just tell me that whatever US television is doing, it's the same with Worlds, which has a global reach. And see how the realities might not be exactly right.
It's also the same story when it came to prize pools. I mean, how often did we see articles or coverage talking about this prize pool, this is how much this player is making. TI is now brought in more of a prize pool than the Super Bowl or than tennis or, these kinds of things. And again, that's not counting the fact that we crowdfunded, those prize pools. That's not coming from necessarily the same source or same pools of income that are, generating the prize pools or the salary amounts and things like that, for other events. And so, you're exactly right. And we do that. It's kind of like we pick and choose, we choose, oh, look at our high viewership. Oh, look at our high, prize pool, and we write our narrative on it. But then when it comes to something else, we say, no, we're nothing like sports. We don't want to be anything like sports. Don't compare us to sports. We're not like that. So it's still, again, in an effort to try to say, look, hey, mom, look, we're doing good. And we choose those from there, I think. I always think about the attempt for Overwatch League to become a franchise in such a way that it represents the different cities, and that you could only have one team from that city, in much like a lot of sports where you have your fan base and your home team and things like that, and how they tried so hard, I think, to copy that, and it just doesn't work for esports. It's just not the same thing. And they dumped millions of dollars into buying these franchise spots and doing this. And yet they're no bigger or better than most of our teams that are, okay, for Dota, for example, one NA team, Evil Geniuses here, is how many NA folks? And, they're coming from other regions of the world and everything, but they're still considered an NA team and representing that. And I think that, it was, again, an attempt to try to mimic something in sports, but without taking into consideration why it doesn't work in sports and esports.
I think the most important thing for esports is to just acknowledge how unique this industry is, how it started, what it made it boom so big, right? And stop copying and stop desperately be mainstream, because when you set the mainstream, I mean, if you want to be on Eurosport all day, you'll just have to adjust to a point where you don't recognize yourself anymore, And this is a bit what scares me when people try desperately to put esports on the same page with sports. We are sports, or we should be sports, Yes, well, recognition is important, but for other reasons.
Right. And once you open it up like that, what hands are you letting get involved in that? Now we're talking about, we want to be, esports and we want to go to the Olympics. We want to have an Olympic representation. Now we're opening esports up to these old men that are running an Olympic, committee and don't know anything about our esports. And, like we said last week, we won't be allowed to cheer at our events if we continue on along this way, just like they can't cheer at the Olympics this year. So, when we start opening it up to please almost everyone or please the sponsors, not sponsors, but the non-endemic sponsors that we're looking to seek or something, we sometimes open ourselves up to what their priorities are then or what their visions are, and they're not always going to line up. I think that, like you're saying, Div, that kind of gets a little scary into who are we giving that power to then, or what direction do we end up going down when we start opening those doors?
Because you brought up this Olympic thing, I always wondered, we had a couple of WSG tournaments, right, before going into SAA games, and those WSG tournaments featured a lot of other games besides Dota. They had CSGO, they had Hearthstone, they had StarCraft, and so on. For Dota, an Olympic format will never work because in Dota, as you just said, there are not so much national or town-based teams. There's nothing like that. Maybe in League, can explain us more how in League we have national teams more, right? But when you force this idea of esports should be into Olympics, do you actually think about what Olympics have as rules? Because I don't think a game where you count death streak, killing streak, a game where you have blood on the floor will ever go to Olympics. So if you want to have esports into Olympics, I guess the most you can do is some card game, to be honest.
Or like a sports simulation game, right? Like, having FIFA, which is kind of funny because you have the real football right there. So, yeah.
Yeah, or Rocket League, for instance.
Oh, Rocket League.
But yeah, and then you have to ask yourself: is this esports getting acceptance, the big acceptance from the sports world, or is just us trying to, not us, but different game developers trying to bend the knee to say, or to do whatever it takes to be mainstream. Again, I think
it goes back to be careful what you wish for, because if it comes true, it might not be the way that you're hoping or you want it to develop or happen.
Yeah, I remember watching the WESG games, right? It's not the same because when you see these players kind of like, they're not playing with their own teammates, but like with fellow countrymen, and it's kind of fun in a way. It's like you're watching some sort of all-star game, but at the same time, they're not taking it too seriously. Same thing with Overwatch. Overwatch as well. They have one, I think, during BlizzCon, a couple of years back. So where you have like national teams and all, but some countries are definitely much stronger than the others. Because of like how these games are more developed and they have better scene there. Yes, you can say the same thing, for traditional sports as well. For example, like, let's say football or basketball, you have like so-called the basketball nation, the football nation. Yeah, it's true. It's kind of the similar in traditional sports as well. But I don't enjoy watching like this kind of representation for esports. It just lost all the fanfare when all these brands, all these esports organizations been like building for years, So yeah, it's kind of like it's a separation for me. It's actually a big turn off when it comes to this kind of thing for me.
And you don't like it because it's something that it's forced, to fit into a format where esports, every game has a different set of rules. Every game is different and unique in its own way. It can't just fit into a format that existed for 100, 200 years before us, That's why, again, I say keep our authenticity and push with that and get this industry bloom the way it did for the past 20 years into even bigger thing.
I think there's
with
a
the
lot
tools
of
we have.
right, and I think there's a lot of merit to not wanting to reinvent the wheel. So, originally looking over at what was esports doing, what was sports doing, traditional sports, what worked, what are things that we can build on, because why should we have to reinvent something? But I think that we're also an incredibly different generation or span of generations of people than, started our traditional sports, much more global, much more tech savvy, much more, these kinds of things. So we know how to use, example, our streaming, our Twitch, our, different digital markets and everything for promotion, for holding different sorts of events or tournaments, for twisting things around, new platforms, new sponsorships. And I think that we should be looking at our strengths, which is that, in order to progress and move forward, instead of holding ourselves back and looking at something else just because we wanted to gain some kind of recognition from it.
Yeah. Will you have any thoughts about this? Like, esports or like, trying to fit in?
I personally hope that we don't try to fit in, because then we're just conforming to the man, so to speak. I'm not actually a fan that the Olympics actually want to include esports to it. I actually hope that we could get our very own e-Olympics of sorts. I think that would actually work a lot better, and that would actually
rule sets and stuff, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like that would actually help to gain a much wider audience, especially for people who aren't familiar with many of the games. Like Rocket League, for example, would be a very good, let's say, e-Olympics games, but it's still very much underrated in the sense that not a lot of people actually know or care very much about the game, except for probably in NA and some certain European countries. So yeah, I think an e-Olympics would definitely be a lot better as trying to pile a bunch of random video games into Olympics and calling it esports,
Yeah. And I think that's
Yeah.
definitely one of the biggest differences, right, between esports and sports, which is like I would say the the spectator experience, right? Because when you watch a sport games, I would say one of the main difference is actually like the rule set. Like the rules of football or even basketball or like tennis, badminton, they never really change for many years. Like maybe minor changes here in terms of how they keep count and how they determine the winner, right? But for games like I would say MOBA, for like Dota, LOL, you have patches every other week, every few months, and for general mainstream audience, to kind of want to just tune in and on their TV and it's like, let's watch some Dota. It's not possible. It's not viable at all, right? It's kind of impossible for my mom to just switch on TV. Oh, today I will watch LOL. Next tomorrow I'm gonna watch some CS:GO. Yeah, they won't be able to catch the rule set and everything so fast. Yeah, it's not. And the thing is that something like traditional sports has been engraved into our, I would say, our lifestyle since the very beginning. From education. When we were young, we have in schools and everything, we have already taught about some of the rules, how to play these games and stuff like that. But yeah, maybe in the future, maybe you can argue that we might absorb some of these esports title into school syllabus, but I doubt so. But yeah, yeah, to me the differences is there, and the fundamental nature is very different. So we shouldn't try too hard. I mean, for either party to kind of like try to associate with each other or like kind of like fit in. It's okay to coexist. It's okay to partner with each other, because like I think my next point that I want to bring up is like, the some of the sporting brands, like your Paris, as in your PSG, your Paris Saint-Germain, and all that they're buying into the esports world, right? I mean, expanding your horizon is fine to a certain extent, but just don't try to say that, oh, to demand, we are the same thing. We want to have the same level of this and that. I just don't
Yeah.
think it's fair. Yeah.
Talking about coexistence, I think one of the most important parts of esports getting sports recognition, it's the status for the players, because as you just saw with the international, not being widely or not being recognized as a sport competition in that country, it means that you can't hold the tournament during pandemic, right? And having a an athlete recognition, official recognition for your players, for your team, for your tournament, for your game. It means so many other things besides mainstream and sponsorship. It means different kind of visas, different kind of taxes, and this is the logistical important part for esports to solve. And again, I'm just afraid that our industry, or some people, leaders in our industry, aimed only at the money that you can make from the mainstream instead of solving the logistics first.
Right, which doesn't have anything really to do even with sports itself, because you have musicians, you have different, cultural artists and actors and so on that still are able to hold events, concerts, things like that, or obtain their visas for working or living based off of the entertainment cultural visa that is available. So it again, we're looking at traditional sports, but we also do have other examples that don't require it to be where we have to look at sports for that. We should be looking at it as a standalone. We fall into the sporting cultural entertainment aspect, and we should be seen as our own thing within those. And that would, allow still for all of those things to happen with the same kind of respect and the same kind of notoriety and the same kind of privilege that they get, but without even having to compare it to sports or esports or something. Why do we have to say we can't go in there because we're not like esports? We could say we can't go in there because we're not even like musicians, who are holding a concert, or actors. So
yeah, I think I like where you're coming from, and I think it kind of sparks me into another train of thought as well, because like I think this kind of thing is not that easy to solve as well, right? Because it really depends on like the region and like the respective countries, like the governments and all, to sort out the infrastructure, right? Because we do have countries that recognize, esports as a legit pathway or career, or even like equivalent to sports. They may not call them sports, they just call them esports, but they have very legit infrastructure. Like for example, like Korea, China, you have Casper, you have all that. They actually set up a lot of the fundamental infrastructure for the players, for the organizations to follow. There are a lot of rules that I think is important, right, to have, because it's similar to sports. You do need all these to govern the people, because as we mentioned earlier, is competitive nature, right? So you do need that. You do need to make sure that we feed these people, everything are being taken care of, like every not just the players, but even the managers and all that. If I'm not mistaken, they need to like acquire some sort of licenses in order to practice as like to even be a manager, and not just, and then Tom, Dick, and Harry can be like, yeah, let me just nanny be take care of your team. So yeah, I this is very different. I think the mindset in these countries, I would say, would be something that like a lot of the other countries that are still developing, they're still trying to accept esports. They should learn from them. That's my 2 cents.
And yeah, when you have esports as esports under government, acceptance or regulation, then you can look into how you can grow this industry from inside or from outside. You can have scholarship programs. You have all sort of other things that actually help the industry on the long term than just tapping out as, I don't know, a superstar from outside telling me that X tournament is coming from Super Bowl, or the X prize pool is the same with Wimbledon. I just heard something very similar the other day, because Wimbledon is starting, right? And somebody told me we have similar prize pools, and I was like, mate, no, it's not working like that. I mean, yes, Wimbledon has $48 million or around that prize pool this year. And TI is also 40, but that's a team game. This is a solo game, and there are so many other differences, right? Why should we put them together just to make the international look as good as Wimbledon? I don't find it right, the comparison.
Okay.
Somebody tell me I'm crazy.
No. I'm with you. I'm just trying to also like
gonna be me. It won't be me.
Yeah, I think let's talk about the money making side of things, right? I would say, since we are talking about money, we're talking about businesses. I would say, like, I mean, whether you're talking about esports or like traditional sporting organizations or whatever, whether you're the organizers, you're the teams, you're the players, everybody, they have to make something. to get something back, they feed themselves, they feed their family. So yeah, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the business side of things. I would say that the fundamental business models for an esports organization and a sporting organization is pretty similar. I mean, for me, to me at the very least. But the thing is, for like a sporting organization, usually it's not that simple for you to diversify your sports or your teams, right? It's kind of rare for you to hear, let's say, a brand that has like, 5, 6 other activities that they are actually sponsoring. Yeah, usually they will try to ground them into either a nation, not nation, a city or whatever, like your EPL, your NBA and stuff like that. Yeah, it's very rare that you have like a team. That's very different. But whereas for like esports, this team culture, this organization culture where they can diversify, and I would say the ease of them that do just, I want to pick up this team and carry this banner under them is very different. And I like that, because I like the differences between these, right? Because I would not want to have them to mix it up again, because like, to be honest, when we first have like the like the PSG, LGD, and like the AS Monaco Gambit, I was kind of like, is it gonna work? Is it gonna be a long-term thing? But yeah, I mean, they kind of proved me wrong. They're actually still around. Like, it's been a couple of years right now, and they still believe in the coexistence. And I think, yeah, there's a possible way for us to actually have this kind of crossover and still work, because like I said, fundamentally, it's quite similar. Yeah, just the business model might be different. Yeah. Any thoughts on this? Yeah.
Definitely helps that they are, like, let's say, esports organizations, they're not locked by regions. So that's actually a very good plus point. Like, if let's say you wanted, for example, Fnatic's a Swedish-based organization, if I'm not mistaken, and they have their Dota 2 team, which is based in Southeast Asia. So it actually works really well for organizations where they can pick up teams from all over the globe, and they're just not locked to their very own region as well. So that's a good point for them. Definitely.
Well, you also have in traditional sports, you have your governing agencies, such as in basketball, it's the NBA, and in American football, it's the NFL. You have, these governing things, and they have their rules, and they determine how different money is spent or comes in and things like that, and who you can pick up and when you can pick them up. It's a lot more strict, and it's very tightly run. And we see what happens when people try to break out of that with that super awesome premier league that tried to occur, that lasted, 48 hours, 24 hours or something, and it got shot down. Like, you can't do this, and there's that going on. But somehow when they pick up the sports teams, it's like there's lot more leeway. They don't have the same regulations because we don't have the same regulations. So an owner can say, I'm really interested in this esport, or this team or something like that, and pick it up, and it doesn't have to fall within the same kind of regulations that they have to follow for their other stuff. So it's a little bit more fun, it's a little bit more relaxed. If we started adding in things like that to esports, where Dota now has this Dota regulation people and stuff, we'd probably see a lot less ability for teams to be able to come in and pick up or sponsor and stuff like that too. Or they wouldn't want to, because they'd have more regulations on them, and they already have to deal with that in their traditional sports. So, what do they want to do this for? So I think that's a pretty big thing too, that allows them to be able to do it with more flexibility.
Then you have, again, we go into this, how these industries are different, because even in esports, everything is run so differently from a game developer to another. I mean, you just look at Dota, how wild free is everything, right? And hectic. And then you look at League of Legends and how strict they are, and how everything is regulated by Riot, right? And if you ask any Dota 2 player if he wants a life under the Riot regulation, he will tell you, no way, no. and look at, and I'm not very, very familiar with the insides of the league scene, so I will let Will tell us how his scene feels about feeling safe with what they have as rules, right?
Okay, to be honest, for me, the way I look at it is Riot actually sets a good baseline, a very good foundation for teams to actually work with, as compared to Dota, where it's a lot more free fall, I would say. Yeah, so Riot actually sets a very good foundation for teams to actually build on it. And I think that's not too bad. But again, with a lot of the rules and restrictions, yeah, that one could actually pose quite a lot of issues. And I think quite a lot of teams aren't actually very happy with that as well.
But the players are actually fine with it though.
Are they?
That's what I mean. From my observation, like yes, you of course you may have like some players that of course they may not get the right opportunity or whatever, that they have their own complaints. But in general, most of the players they're actually quite from my observation, they are quite comfortable with the stability, right? When they know once they're being signed by this team, they will be there for a long time. They will have like that, because it's not as simple as like, oh, I'm gonna drop you tomorrow and that's it. Because the Riot says that you can't. There's a window, there's whatever and all that. Yes, Dota is trying to do that a little bit, trying to have this window or whatever, but you can still kind of find loopholes in it. And then it's
the difference is that
dodgy.
Valve
Yeah.
doesn't want to actually hands-on manage it, so they write these rules in hopes that somehow they'll manage themselves. And that, obviously isn't going to happen, versus Riot, who puts their hands in and manages it very strictly.
Yeah.
And therefore holds accountability, keeps everybody in line with it and everything. And that's the bigger thing. Valve is saying, oh, well, we kind of want this, and here's the rule, but it's vague. They don't pay attention to it. They throw it out, there for everything. From my understanding, and from Garter's kind of foot in both camps at one point and everything, was that there's a lot of stability. There's a pipeline to follow. There's security. These kinds of things are incredibly appealing, especially for people that are trying to make a pro career that's a little bit more lasting. What the appeal is on the other side is it's a very Americanized kind of concept, right? It's kind of like, I'm going to win the lotto. The streets are paved with gold. Everybody has a chance to make it big, is kind of what the American dream, right? Like, and Valve and Dota kind of sell you on that. Anybody can get to TI. Anybody can sign up for the open qualifiers and make it all the way. And not anymore. Yeah, not this year. Not this year. But that was kind of the mentality where Riot was like, well, if you didn't get picked up in our roster change season, then unless you were on an academy team and someone on the main team got benched and this and that, it wasn't going to happen. And so Dota players are very used to having this, I'm able to dream big, I'm able to make this great team that's going to go through the qualifiers and still have a chance. And, the league players are very used to and enjoy their security and the comfort. It's incredibly two very different mindsets. And I think that it actually is that players in one camp and players in the other camp don't want what each other has. It's a case of where they don't think the grass is greener on the other side, versus that they do think it's greener on the other side, because they're very comfortable in what they have and the paths that they're able to go or not go.
It's funny because talking about this, how you feel secure with one game developer or one scene and unsecure in other, we have two very strong examples of actually it doesn't matter at all. You had Blizzard creating a great or a very stable scene for many years for HOTS, Heroes of the Storm, and remember how that game got shut down, with everyone getting a notice a week or a few days before and not knowing what to do with their lives as players moving forward. And then you have Valve, this super hectic, super open game developer who promised you $1 million tournament for Artifact, and 2 years later they say, sorry, we are stopping development on this. It doesn't simply work. And I know players from Hearthstone who actually made the switch. They made the full transition to Artifact. They spent a year or two investing in learning this game and getting good at it, because there was this 1 million tournament promised, right, on the horizon. So yeah, it's tricky. I'm not going to be surprised if in 5 years I will hear from Riot that they are shutting down some, I don't know, Wild Rift or something, because it simply doesn't work. Or it doesn't bring the money that they want or the attention.
Which brings up an entirely another point, which is again where esports is going with the mobile direction and mobile games, and again, if we're trying to say comparing sports to esports and bringing it back to that, esports, the game developers are going even more extreme in a sense with now mobilized, mobile games, mobile tournaments, things that are just on your phone and everything else, and I'm not saying that's a negative way to go, but that's going even further away from a sports model in a certain sense than before and everything. And then to try to say, well, we're going this advanced, this progressive, but we're going to be using a rule set or a structure or an infrastructure or an ecosystem or something that's based off of this traditional, method. They don't line up. There's just not going to work. There's going to be too much of a communication breakdown in trying to bring those two together. So we keep going this way, but then we keep getting kind of pulled back because we've tethered ourselves to this over here.
And then you have to ask, you have to ask yourself, who is actually pushing or forcing this esports debate into going to mainstream? Because I'm pretty sure there are not people that are very ground and very deep rooted in this industry. There are always some sponsors that got into esports world and they want to drag their business to the mainstream, to their esports business or their esports side of the business. There are always investors like, I don't know, Rick Fox or like David Beckham now with Guild, right? Using their image as much as they can to drag their part of the business from esports into mainstream and then ask for sports recognition. I think it's more of a case of like that,
Yeah, to jump on that, I think one of the reasons why these organizations or these influencers, they are trying to switch the perception, esports is like sports. So because like to a certain extent, gaming, as a culture, as a habit, as a whatever, in some country, in some region, in a lot of places in the world, it still has that negative connotation, right? Where like it's addictive, whatever, and all that. WHO at one point still call it, it's an addiction. So by kind of like equating esports can be like sports, it kind of cleanse it a little bit, giving a more positive light to it. I don't know. I mean, this is my guess, and this is what I observe as well, based on how they're trying to emulate that and to make it more positive. It's true that there are some like I would say pro players or whatever, like their lifestyle may not be as healthy as, let's say, a professional tennis player. But there are also teams that are actually paying a lot of attention to that. They set curfews. They they make sure that they take care of themselves, because playing games is not so much of just sit there 24 hours and play, right? It's about mental stability, your mechanical skill, your micro, your macro, and a lot of other things, and not just this. So yeah. So I think a lot of people are starting to aware that starting to aware that you can't just equate things like that. And a lot of things a lot of teams are also paying attention to all these welfare, this kind of like mental wellness, all these things. We have like teams with sports psychologists and stuff like that, which is great. I would say that's something that is great to learn from, like sporting organizations, to have all these services available for the players.
And it's again a thing about, listen to you talking about this, I realize it's a problem of perception, because in esports, just like in sports, to become a very successful or very skillful player, professional player, you start from a very young age. And people that are parents now or grandparents, are used to their kid, their toddler, to be sent to a tennis club, a football club, a swimming, whatever, to be active. And when your 6-7-year-old child, all he wants is to play some Fortnite or some League after he's done with the homework, you you just tell him this is not a future for you, So it's a problem of perception and how perhaps again esports should look at how we should improve that and how we should adopt a very healthy lifestyle and understand the limits of our body and so on, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of folks in the industry now. You have Caitlin, who is a physical therapist. She works with 1HP, and they do a lot of seminars. They've even been at BTS events doing massages and hand, wrist exercises and movements with the players, bringing up their awareness and introducing them to different ways to either prevent injury or to address some of that. You also have Coach Tyler Johnson, who used to be with the San Francisco 49ers, and he's been working with teams. He worked with Pro Dota Gaming, he worked with Optic Gaming and so on their physical health and wellness, he would address things from nutrition all the way to physical exercises to keep yourself in shape, and also like supplements and stuff for cognitive exercises and performance. So it's a lot about just performance enhancement overall. And then we have all of our, sports psychologists. We have, Complexity had the entire training center when they moved in with the Dallas Cowboys and so on. So we have individuals and we have some pockets of these kinds of either organizations or the actual big organizations pulling these specialists in or adding them into part of their training process and everything to integrate it more, but the awareness is still so small, or the integration is still on a smaller level as well, because it has to do with how much finances do you have. If you have a team that can afford it or not afford it, where does that come from? There's a lot of privilege to it. Most of these that we're talking about are in the United States, versus who's there for South America or something, what do they have available? So there's a lot of discrepancy based off of the regions as well, and what resources they have available or what funds they have available. So again, that's another part of why I think they strive for so much legitimacy, again, is also trying to be able to get the funds to be able to look at some of these resources. But it's definitely there. It's definitely growing, but it's not widespread yet.
Yeah, agree. Okay, I'm gonna drive the discussion to another topic, but it's definitely still relevant, right? I want to talk about career option. Like whether esports or sports. Which market is easier, in a way to break into or to even start. Because I think, okay, let's rephrase my question. I wouldn't start it that way. I would say for esports and sports, what are the differences in like trying to get into it? Because yeah, I mean, it's obviously a very different process, but I think it's good for us to explore. And I want to pose this topic to Will first, because I know that you were once a pro am player, right? Yeah, you were this close, to be a pro. Yeah,
This
so
close.
yeah,
You're not about this close.
yeah, I want to hear your thoughts about like getting into the scene. How easy
Okay.
or how difficult was it? Yeah.
Honestly, over my very, very short stint as a pro am player, is basically just a few friends and I that we discovered a tournament that was happening, I think, in a different state. Was it a different state? Oh no, it was probably like a few blocks down from us, and we thought like, oh, what the heck? And it was a tournament organized by Orange, the cyber cafe that actually owns the team as well. And I got to play with Mushi as well, so that was good. And I got my ass handed to it. But I think overall, trying to get into esports is a lot easier as compared to, let's say, trying to go pro in football or basketball. Because all you need is basically just you and your friends, and you guys just basically sign up for a tournament. You do well, great, you get the recognition for it. You do bad, there's always a lot more tournaments coming up. Especially back then when the scene was still growing, tournaments were popping up, like, I think, every other week. And I joined a fair few as well, especially online or even in LAN tournaments as well. So I think for new players to actually want to get into the scene is a lot easier, especially seeing as most of these games are free now. They can just pick it up online and join in-game house leagues and things like that. Whereas in traditional sports, if you want to get into it, there's like entry fees that you have to pay for and training classes and things like that. And only if you have something special, then probably you can actually push it to the next level. Whereas in video games, I feel like it's a lot more easier to get into when, how do I say this? Oh no. Yeah, basically it's just a lot easier to get into as compared to traditional sporting events because there's tons of kids around who all love the same kind of sports. Whereas in video games, it's a lot smaller. I would say it's slightly more niche as compared to, let's say, someone who's a huge fan of football and wants to be a professional football player. I think a lot more people actually strive to be that than a professional Dota player, you know? So the market's a lot smaller as well, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the big difference in how you make it, how easier, how hard or how easy it is to make into an esports, into a game as a to become a professional is the fact that you play from your home on a ladder. And in 1 year or 2 years, you'll know your value. You know where you stand with the biggest heads in your game, right? If I play Dota for the past 12 years and I'm still 4K MMR, it's pretty obvious that I will never be a professional player. But if I play Dota for 1 year and I'm top Europe MMR, I will win the international next year. Look at just at the Thompson's example, you know. And if you are very good at the game and you are very talented, you are truly have a skill for that game, right? Naturally comes to you. It's easier for you to get also noticed by these professional teams because you play with them in the pubs. Their coaches are actively looking, right? Are just noticing the good players in the pubs. While if you want to be a professional football player, you start at 5 years old or 7 years old, and you grind until 12, 15, when you will be told if you can make it to a junior team or not. Where in Dota or League or many other games, by, I don't know, at 15 years old, you can already be a millionaire. But again, this is a narrative that fits our a good storyline about esports, right? Because it actually doesn't happen so often. Thompson is just one, Ramses is just one, you know, Faker is just one. And I come back to what I said at the beginning, how you put into perspective all this.
Yeah.
And it also is, if you think about it, you, like Will said, you can get a couple of your friends and have a dream, right? And apply to all these different tournaments, play in different settings, even just in MMR ranking games, you know, climb up the ladder, get noticed this way, play with professional players, you know, if you're good enough in your bracket, and you have chance to stand in, you have this. What do you qualify as being professional? Tier, you know, team secret, or are we talking about even tier 2 is considered professional? You have a lot more options where if you want to play, you know, professional football, you have to wait for the scouts, the recruiters, you have to wait for somebody to be benched or, you know, their contract to be set, you know, for you to even, maybe you get on the team, but you've not touched, you know, a ball the entire year, you know, things like this. So it's, what do we constitute as being professional and successful in it? You know, what do you count as I've made it, you know? And then also, you know, we have a lot more opportunities because it's a little bit more on, the onus is on you. You can work harder, you can join everything, you can grind it, you can get noticed, you can network, you can, you know, put your foot in the door and things like this, as opposed to just waiting to have to take a spot open from someone who leaves a team because there's only going to be 16 teams, period. And how many people on those teams, you know, and then how many open up and everything, where you and your entire team can make it into Division 2 at least, or something to that effect. Or, you know, you look at the discrepancies and the gaps in, say, North America, right? You know, here in North America, you had Quincy Crew, you had Evil Geniuses, you had Four Zoomers, you know, and a couple of these, you know, teams, and then the gap fell tremendously, right? So now Evil Geniuses and Quincy Crew, they make it to TI, now all of a sudden your qualifiers for TI are including, these players that have never really had much of a chance to play any kind of tournaments or lands or anything like that. They were in Division 2, for North America League and everything. And now they're having a chance to even play in TI qualifiers. And there's more, not that they'll make it to TI, but somebody else might notice them from all the castings or the games or something else on a team and recruit them and build it up that way and stuff. And so there's definitely more of a chance for you as an individual for getting noticed, I think.
And there's, if you are really skilled and talented at a certain game, it doesn't matter that it's Dota, League of Legends, CSGO, or whatever, there are more chances for you to make it. Where that, compared to, I don't know, if you are a brilliant swimmer or at a young age, or pick whatever sport, it will take you a very long time to get scouted, to get trained. And even after you get scouted to fit with a team that it's, I don't know, 12 people or depending on the game, right?
And look how many people came over from Han when Han stopped and made it, or that go from CSGO to Valorant or things like this, maybe they're not, the number one player, but they're making a career or they're taking those steps and they've been able to transition from one game to another, which means there's still that much more opportunity because they're not stuck into, I play only football and that means I can only play this sport and only this here and so on. You can expand a lot more into a little bit different.
Like a traditional sports person, like sportsman, to really transition. Let's say, I can only think of a few names that actually managed to do that and still be successful about it.
Michael Jordan is one, but he's the exception. He's not the rule.
But he failed. He didn't do well in baseball.
Yeah, I was going to say, but his baseball
He was
career
minor
wasn't.
league, yeah.
And then he technically played professionally for golf as well for a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not that easy.
Actually, that brings up a very good point that you're actually limiting, if let's say you're a professional athlete, you're limiting yourself to just one sport. Whereas if you're an esports athlete, you can actually diversify and move on to like various other games as well. Like you could be a Dota 2 professional and then move on to League, or you can actually just transition to FPS or maybe even something more like RTS, like StarCraft or something, like the doors are a lot more wide open if you're an esports athlete as compared to being a traditional sportsman.
And you also have more options for diversification in terms of if you were to get an injury, if you get older, if your lifestyle changes, you have a family, things like this. Okay, now I'm going to be a caster. Now I'm going to be an analyst. Now I'm going to be a coach. Now I'm going to own a team. Now I'm going to, there's a lot more options for you to go down a streamer, any of these things and still be within the game that you love, still have it as a professional career, right? In the industry. You're not limited. If an athlete gets an injury or they reach a certain age and a threshold, where do they go from there? How many become analysts or coaches from there? It's usually over.
The difference, another difference, we kept saying the difference, there are so many. Yeah. Perhaps one thing with traditional sports is that when a very high profile player, I don't know, football, tennis, Roger Federer or Messi, or gets an injury tomorrow and their career is done, they are settled. They don't need any more money because in their 20-year career, they've done enough, to have 2 generations before being almost secured, where in esports, it's not working like that. I mean, we still have, I don't know, players who probably won the international 1, 2, 3, and perhaps struggling with money today because, again, yes, the TI, the international prize pool is big and is crowdfunded by the community, but the salaries are not all great. The other tournaments, they don't have great, they won't settle you for life. And even in League of Legends, the prize pool for Worlds is 2 million, right?
Yeah, it's actually not that great when you think about it.
Yeah, when you think about it, I mean, these players have, let's say, 10 to 15 years career, tops. And if you don't win Worlds 7 times in your life, then you might not be settled at 30, at 30 years old.
Right. I think with that, I'm going to wrap up our episode soon. But before that, I do have one question for each of you. Um, what makes you kind of like fall in love with esports? Why? What makes you stick to esports?
Hmm,
Yeah,
that is a very good question.
yeah, can be
Because
some.
I'm still stuck in the two.
For me, it's simple. I simply didn't like anymore what was happening with sports in general because of the many years ago when the betting started to become a problem in football and all other sports. Our TVs were flooded just like today with betting commercials. Everything was questionable in terms of competitive value and what's happening there. And one day I actually decided not to have a TV anymore in my house. And I think it's 10 years since I don't own a TV on a conscious choice, And what I liked a lot about, I was already playing Dota and everything else, but what I liked about the broadcast and everything was the grassroots feeling. I mean, what Beyond the Summit was doing 6 years ago, the Beyond the Summit couch tournaments, the TI hubs that we've seen from 2GD Studio, uh, the TI casts even from TI1 to TI3. I don't think I'm gonna ever erase that from my memory, and it still gives me chills to think how awesome we were back then, and how stiff we want and we try to be today, and all dressed up and just to fit 7 p.m. hour on TV for one match. Yeah, this is what keeps me in the sports. The fact that we are for real and we are authentic and we care about our industry.
Yeah, I was going to say for me, it's the authenticity and the accessibility for anyone and everyone to be a part of it, to grow into it, to have opportunities and chances for there to be a lot of growth and development, both as an industry and as own professional, divisions, things like that. There's so much passion. The people who are in it want to be in it because that's what their heart is, that's what their passion, that draws me, that's like a magnetic type of thing. And I think that's the biggest pull.
For me, I would definitely say it's just the ease of convenience, as well as like Christy mentioned, the accessibility. Like a lot of people can get into esports nowadays, and it's a lot easier to actually try and break it and go pro. And for me, I just find it a lot more entertaining to watch these days as compared to regular sports. I'm getting bored of that. Yeah.
For me, it's actually the community. It could be the grassroots feeling. It could be all the authenticity that we mentioned earlier. But I can have a better conversation with, let's say, like a fanatic fans, or even like some hardcore esports fan, better than, let's say, having a conversation with someone that's super hardcore about sports.
Oh my god, yes. Especially
Yeah,
if you're talking to rival fans.
that kind of devotion and rivalry is very different, and of course it's great for different reasons. But for me, somehow I think esports is still a better cup of tea for me. Yeah. And yeah, I've been enjoying gaming and the whole gaming culture, the whole esports thing for more than 10 plus years, and I don't think it's something that I will ever quit. I think. All right. With that, we're gonna end our episode today. So if you like what you see and you like what you hear, subscribe, comment, leave down anything. Tell us what you like about show, what you don't like about us, maybe. Yeah, we are completely open to any sort of suggestion or feedback. We are also up on Spotify and iTunes, and yeah, you can also follow us on social media, or even go to our site, GosuGamers.net, to find out more. I would say esports coverage, features, and any sort of storyline. But yeah, I mean, if you want to get in touch with us, to talk about certain things, or even give us some sort of, I don't know, feedback, info, tips, whatsoever, reach out to us at editorial@GosuGamers.net. And with that, bye and see you guys next time.